the first question, which is a bit about the strange time that everyone's going through at the moment, with lots of cancelled concerts and activities and everything. How are you bearing up with all that sort of thing?
It's difficult. I think, I don't know how all of you feel and how it's going in Spain right now, but here in America, it's a disaster. And I think just psychically for me, I don't know if you've all had this experience. There was the beginning, which was so shocking, and just trying to imagine what was happening. And then I wouldn't say things went up, but I think I got used to it. Everything became normalized. And okay, so this is how we do this now. And we do these Zoom chats, and we're distant from each other. And now I would say in the last month, I feel like I'm going back down again. I'm really ready for this to be over and to go back to normal. And I fear that we have a long ways to go before we get back. Yes. So I'm trying to find the new wind to go back up.
Starting from the beginning, do you remember how you first came into contact with choral music? Can you remember your first experiences of that?
I remember it like it was yesterday. So I was 18 years old. I didn't really have any exposure to classical music at all. In high school, when I was a teenager, I played in pop and rock bands. I had synthesizers and drum machines. I wrote pop songs. I wanted to be in Depeche Mode. I still wanted to be. If they were to call me today and say, "Quick, come be the fourth keyboard player," I would drop everything and go. And then I joined choir at the university, only because I went to school. I think in my mind I was going to study physics or astrophysics. I'm fascinated by space and science, but I also love music. And I joined the choir just because the conductor there sort of pulled me in and convinced me that it would be fun for me to do. And the very first day we began singing the Requiem by Mozart. And that was it. It was, I vividly remember standing in the room surrounded by 100 people. And not only had I never sung in a choir before, but I'd never experienced music in 3 dimensions like that. Real counterpoint. We started with the Kyrie. If any of you know it, it's a fugue, this brilliantly constructed fugue, and just happening around me in 3 dimensions. And I think 2 things happened. One, it was this awakening in me. Like my whole life, I was a huge choir nerd, and then I finally found my tribe. And then second, that for the very first time in my life, I felt part of something larger than myself. I really felt it. I wasn't raised religiously, and this was the first time that it was just an awakening. It's the best way I can describe it. I left that one rehearsal, and I knew my true name.
That's really interesting. And was it a gradual progression into conducting from that as well, conducting choirs, or straight into composing? Or
so it took me 7 years to get my first degree. I was a terrible student. I took all kinds of classes that had nothing to do with my degree. I always thought of it like a buffet. I was just eating anything that seemed interesting. And so it wasn't until my 3rd year, when I was 21, that I wrote my first piece. And it was just this little piece that I wrote as a gift to my conductor, this man who had changed my life. And it was called Go Lovely Rose. And so I wrote this little piece for him, and then that got performed at a conference. And the following year, he asked me if I would be interested in trying to conduct the choir in some rehearsals. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I was very enthusiastic. And I did a couple of rehearsals, and then out of the blue, he said, "Would you be interested in coming to be an associate conductor at this place called the College Light Opera Company?" And it's a place on the East Coast of the United States where in 9 weeks, they perform 9 musicals and operettas. Every week, a new musical, a new operetta, with the same cast and fully staged with orchestra. It's just crazy that you just, week after week, you're doing a brand new show. And I had no conducting experience. I mean, just a couple of rehearsals. I could barely read music at that point. And so he really just threw me into the fire. And I did that for 3 summers. And by the end of 3 summers, I at least knew how to give a downbeat and get everybody to come in at the same time.
Wow, amazing. Did you, like, on the podium, how did you express that insecurity? Did you like pretend you could do it all, or did you just say, this is my first experience? And
it's a really good question. I think probably those first years, I tried to fake it. I really tried to pretend. And now I know. Now I've conducted enough orchestras and choirs to know that it's like riding a horse. If you don't know how to ride a horse, the moment you're on the horse knows. It immediately knows that you know what you're doing. And so I think then gradually what I did was I became more vulnerable as a conductor. And I was able to say, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do, and not try to fake my way through everything.
yeah. Do you think about conducting when you write a new piece? Do you think about how you would conduct it, or a piece that would suit you as a conductor?
I do now. I didn't used to before I was really conducting, but now I'm hyper aware of it. And I think it's maybe a better composer, because now I try to write in a way that is, in a way, conductor proof, that the music has to do what it's going to do. You know, that it took me a long time. Something as simple, this will sound so basic, but something as simple, if you want, say with a choir, if you want them to sing forte, okay, you can write a big crescendo and you can write forte, or you can just put everybody on an ah vowel and put them at the top of the register, and they can't help but sing forte. And then it really has not, it just happens, you know, the music unfolds. And I think most of the best music just unfolds. The note writing is constructed in such a way that then the conductor's job is just to get everybody together, not to motivate it to happen. So I think that's really helped. I also, I wrote a piece, this is now 20 years ago, but I wrote a piece for orchestra called Equus, which means horse in Latin, speaking of horses. And Equus is, when I wrote it, I was never thinking that one day I would have to conduct it. And it's ridiculously difficult to play and to conduct. It's so hard to conduct. Every time I have to conduct it myself, I lose sleep the night before. That's a true story. I'm not exaggerating. In fact, I have a funny story about this. So Gustavo Dudamel, the orchestra conductor who's here in Los Angeles, he performed it 4 years ago. And this is all he did. He made it all the way through the entire piece. And then I was standing just off stage, you know, watching, oh my God, Dudamel is conducting my piece. And he comes down at the podium and he passed me. And all he said to me was, "Ooh, that's hard to conduct." And I remember thinking, okay, it's not just me. This is actually hard to conduct. This is so, but I remember when I wrote it, I was incredibly clever. You know, the piece, it's called Equus. And so there's 5 letters in the word Equus, and E, the first letter of Equus, is the 5th letter of the alphabet. So the entire piece is based on the number 5. There's leaps of a fifth up and down and relationship of fifths, and there's 3 + 2 / 4 and 5 / 4 for the time signature and 5 bar phrases. It's all very clever on the page until you have to conduct the damn thing. And so now that I'm conducting, I would never write a piece the way I did like that. I would really make it much more efficient, not only to conduct, but to rehearse. I would make a piece that's quickly put together. I think it's just a better way of composing.
And on the same sort of line, does your composing work go quicker if you know who you're writing for? For instance, do you need the inspiration of the choir or orchestra you're going to be writing for? Do you think of the individuals? Do you think of the people?
Yes, absolutely. So in fact, with the choir, now usually I'm either writing for my own professional choir in London or the Los Angeles Master Chorale. And when I'm writing the alto line, I'm not thinking of altos in the abstract. I'm thinking of these 6 faces. These are the people. I imagine them breathing. I imagine it's so helpful to me. And frankly, it's even helpful if I know the hall where it will first be performed. So I can imagine sitting in the audience and seeing it happen and being an audience member and being drawn along emotionally through the piece.
Yeah. Amazing. what's your, as a former student of Juilliard, what's your experience of the education system in music been in America? And sort of along the same lines, what would you say to a young conductor or composer on his or her first steps in the choral world? No, I think there's two questions really. If you have anything specific to say about the education system as someone who went through that in the States in music. And then another question would be about the first steps of young composers and conductors, and any advice you might have.
So in terms of education, I think in general, and I found this in Europe as well, I don't know if everyone will agree with me, but in terms of classical music education, the conservatory experience seems almost designed to squeeze every ounce of joy out of the experience of making music. There's like levels and levels and levels of deconstruction where you take the thing apart and apart and apart, and at some point, it seems like every student loses track of why they even went into music in the first place. It stops being music and stops being this thing that you feel and in your heart. And in fact, I think in most conservatories, there's even kind of this attitude that if the music is emotional or makes you feel something, then it's trite or it's low class. The music is this entirely intellectual exercise. I disagree. I think it should be both. I think the entire brain and heart should be moved. So that's the first with education. In terms of for conductors and composers just starting out on a career, I mean, we can really get into the nuts and bolts about hustling. I don't know if you all know this word in Spain, but how do you even describe it?
Networking or something like that, or no?
Yeah, networking, I guess, but more just like trying to make something happen. I don't know if this is a very American concept. I don't know how it works in Spain, but in America, what you do is you just start emailing. If you're a composer, you start emailing every conductor you can find an email address for, and you send them audio files and scores, and you call them up and you talk to them and you go to concerts and you meet people and you shake hands. And it's not in a surface way. You're generally trying to connect with people, but in a very bold way, you're saying, I'm a composer. I'd like you to look at my music. And still some of that is faking it, right? Because if you're a composer like me, you're insecure about every note you've written. It's not that you're like, this is the greatest music ever, you must play this. You think, I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe you'll take a look at this. But it's just trying to make something happen. That I think that's the biggest part of it. But for both composers and conductors, I think the most important thing by far is experience and real world experience. So if you're a conductor, I know for me, the only way I ever learned was standing on a podium in front of a group of people who were waiting for me to give some instructions. You can take all the schooling in the world, but until you stand in front of 18 string players and get them all to play at the same time, right? It's very much again like riding the horse. You can read so many books about riding a horse, then you get up on a horse and it's a whole different game. So if I were a conductor starting out, I would just be doing everything I possibly could to get on a podium. And I would say for both composers and conductors, I would start by trying to work with as many amateur musicians as possible. Because the thing about excellent musicians, really great pro musicians, is that they're gonna do a lot of the work for you. When you stand in front of a fantastic orchestra, you start to realize how much they're actually doing and how little you're actually doing as a conductor. Do you know what I mean? That ship will sort of steer itself. It's not until you've worked with a group of amateur musicians and you actually have to mold them and bring them together as an ensemble and make music that you really start to realize how to do this thing and how to efficiently do it. The one other thing I would say then for conductors and composers is to get as close to the fire as possible. So if you're a conductor and you want to conduct orchestras, and let's say you're a fan of the Berlin Philharmonic, then you move to Berlin and you somehow convince them that you will pour coffee for them every day if you can sit in rehearsals and watch them do the thing and bring them scores. If you're a composer and you want to write film scores, you move to Los Angeles and you knock on Hans Zimmer's door and you say, I can carry boxes for you. You get as close to the fire as possible.
Yeah,
and then things will really start to bubble.
There's some young Spanish composers who have gone to Los Angeles, yeah, and they're doing well. Yeah, I know two who are doing really well. Miguel Bezanilla, who was in the Oja. He's been writing, and he gets, in the credits, you see his name on Disney films and stuff. And another one, Granero, I think, who's I think he's been working as well with Dudamel, maybe at Disney Hall.
Fantastic.
It's
really the case. If you can meet the people who are your heroes and who you'd like to work with, more often than not, they need you at some point. I remember I've done 3 film scores now where I worked with Hans Zimmer, and there's a whole team of people, young people around him, and he affectionately calls them space monkeys from Fight Club. It's like, here's just this army of young people who don't sleep, and they do whatever is necessary. But at some point in every film, the deadline is too great and there's just not enough time for one person to write all the music. And so they just they start looking around like, okay, there's a ship and there's 8 people in this room. You do that one, you do that one, you do that one, and suddenly, all right, I'm writing music on a film.
Do they get credits?
They do, and money. Sometimes they don't get credits. Hollywood isn't kind that way. Sometimes, at the beginning, they take your credit. It's a fascinating bargain. You have to make this deal with the devil and decide if it's worth it for you at the beginning.
Another question here. Since our summer program in Galicia, which is in the northwest of Spain, is a conducting course, and our students, choir and string orchestra, are filled with people of different ages, do you think that some of your works are good on a didactic level for people to work on either as conductors or in performance?
I hope so.
Yeah.
You mean pieces that could be used to teach ideas?
On the course, your piece Lux Aurumque was performed, and it's just been published by Walton. Was this your first acclaimed piece? Do you remember how the compositional process went?
It's interesting. I don't know if it was my first acclaimed piece. You mentioned this piece Cloudburst that I wrote before, where Lux Aurumque, it's funny. It's one of my more popular pieces, and I didn't think it would be at first. But I do remember that built into Lux Aurumque is it's what I tried to do with every piece. But Lux was one of the first where I really decided to do this. I have this idea when I'm composing. It's something that I call the golden brick, and the golden brick is a few notes or a chord or a couple of chords that have all of the magic in it for the rest of the piece. And for me, it's more than just a musical motive that I trade around. It's got some bigger idea than just music. And in Lux Aurumque, if any of you know this piece, it starts with, there's just 2 chords and it crescendos for 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, breath. 1, then it does that again, just that motive, crescendo, decrescendo. And my idea before I wrote a note of music was, I wonder if I can teach the audience how to breathe without them knowing that I'm teaching them how to breathe. So the idea was that they would learn this, and as they were listening, would start to breathe. Wait. So, and then that breathing idea, it happens 4 complete times at the beginning of the piece, so that by measure 9, ideally, if we're doing it right as a choir, the choir's actually, the audience is breathing along with us. Then the piece takes and explores, how can we breathe? So it's not just now that we've got them breathing, but let's breathe in an electric way with eyes wide open, and then in an ecstatic way with the hairs on the back of your neck. and then in a very credible way, so that it's just the gentlest thing. And then at the very end of the piece, it actually plays with the breath, so that there's moments where there's long pauses where you're waiting, and then you finally get this exhale. And it was the first time that I'd written a piece like that, where I thought I want to embed this bigger idea into the music than just the music. It's what I now call emotional architecture. And so it's how I build these pieces when I think of this emotional journey that I want the audience to go on. So in that way, Luke's is very special to me.
What about with going back to the situation at the moment? Has that given you fruit for inspiration, or the contrary, has it blocked you artistically? Or?
Yeah, it's the most recent virtual choir that we made. It's Virtual Choir 6, and it's this very, very simple song called Sing Gently. Did any of you participate in it, by the way? Did anyone participate in Virtual Choir 6?
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah, so cool. This is amazing to me that people, actually Spain was really well represented. So I'm so glad. It's first, just, I've been doing these virtual choirs now for 10 years, and it's mind blowing to me that I can be talking to you, and I see Maria G. It's the name is on the Zoom that I'm looking at where you raise your hand. I'm not sure which one of you is Maria, but hey, Maria. It's just crazy to me that you're in Spain, I'm in Los Angeles, and we've never met, of course, but we somehow made music together a couple months ago. It's crazy. And so with that piece, with Sing Gently, that was written specifically because of the time that we're in. And I really felt that, and it's happening more now even than it started at the beginning, but I felt this kind of, this pulling on society, that people were just being really pulled apart, the thread of society. And the piece that I wrote, Sing Gently, it's a metaphor for a way to live with each other, just with compassion and with empathy, just to be gentle with each other. Because as we start to do this, I think we can fear people. We start to see just normal people on the street as a threat suddenly. And especially for us as singers, that somehow singing, this thing that we all love so much, has become a danger to each other and to other people. So it was very much inspired by these times.
Going on to another piece of yours, the Sacred Veil. What was the inspiration, that composition? And is the text where do you start with a text, or does the music and the text come at the same time to you? Or
with the Sacred Veil, it's a new piece, and in fact, it's been performed a few times now, but the final recording will come out in a couple of weeks. And it's probably the most intimate thing I've ever written. It was, there's a man named Charles Anthony Silvestri, he's a poet. He's also my best friend for 30 years. We met in university choir. And together we wrote Lux Arumque. He wrote the Latin poetry for that. We wrote a piece called Sleep, a piece called Leonardo Dreams of His Flying Machine. Some of my most performed pieces were written with his poetry. And 13 years ago, he lost his wife, Julie, to ovarian cancer. She died when she was 36 years old. And he finally felt 4 years ago that he was ready to try to write about this. And so we wrote this big work. It's nearly an hour long, for choir and piano and cello, about that entire journey. It's very, very honest and very specific. We even used 3 of the movements, used Julie's own words that Tony found. It's a really difficult piece. And in terms of writing the music, it's probably my most formal and efficient piece, in that I chose those golden bricks, several of them, and then I tried to write the entire piece using only that material.
Here's another question. Sometimes it looks like composers don't have the possibility to write what they want to write, and they end up writing what they think is going to get them some playing time, what they think will be accepted, because of the music market being as it is now. 90% of, actually, choirs in Spain are amateur. and that affects their possibilities to perform really complicated music. And then Julio goes on to ask, are we losing the music of our time? I know what he means by that. And also I would say, what is the music of our time then? Because there's, you can hear, if you go to Berlin or Madrid, London, whatever, you'll hear contemporary music, some of which goes right over the head of musicians as well, not just of people who don't have experience performing on anything.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, I can only speak for myself. So never once personally have I ever thought I'm going to write music that's popular or try to sell music. I laugh all the time when I think, if actually I was trying to make money, the last thing in the world I would do is be a composer for choir and orchestra. It's the worst job ever in terms of money. I'll go be a banker or a lawyer. And and I always, every piece I set out, I want it to be performed by mortals. Do you know what I mean? Not like I'm not looking for it to only be performed by 5 people on earth. I really want it to be performed by very good amateurs or professionals. Like I'm hoping for that because I want the music to live. I want it to, the whole reason I'm writing the notes down is so that other people will take it and perform it. Again, not for money, but more just why are we doing what we're doing? Do you know what I mean? For me, music is only about communicating and about connecting people. The thing is, for me, every time I set out to write something, let's say simple, or that could be performed by a wide group of people, I have this thing, I do it every time where it's, I'll start with, okay, this time I will only write 4 parts, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, and it will be with piano, and lots of groups will be able to perform it. And then I start to get into the writing of it, and I'm looking at this exquisite poetry, and I think, well, actually, just in this moment, it would be so nice to illuminate this word with 8 parts. We'll just split a little bit. And then I start getting into it, and then pretty soon, everybody's splitting into 14 parts, and it's just this thing, and I know my publishers are always like, oh, God, just write something simple. And it's not that I'm trying to impress or I'm trying to, it's only because it's what the moment needs. It's what the poetry needs, right? And so I feel for a composer that the only North Star they have, the only touchstone they have is what music do they want to hear? If you were on a desert island and you couldn't bring Carole King and James Taylor or Depeche Mode, what is the music that's in your heart, like truly in your heart? And I'm not always successful with this, but I'm always trying to write music that is just completely me. That's just, and I would say half of my composing day, because now I've been through an education with music, is I've got Stravinsky on one shoulder and I've got Bach on the other shoulder. And all day long, they're just whispering to me, you don't know what you're doing. You don't have enough education. If you would have studied harder, you could have been better. Go listen to the Rite of Spring, go listen to the B minor Mass, this kind of thing. And just quieting them and saying, okay, here are the tools I have. Here's the ability I have. I'm going to just try to write something honest and pure. That's the only thing I can go for. And then hopefully that music will resonate in people who perform it and who listen to it, the audience. It's also, last thing I'll say about it is, for me as a composer, it's very, very important that the audience is brought on the journey. I never understood music that seems to keep the audience away, that pushes them away, Yeah. It's not that music can't be difficult. I mean, Stravinsky's the perfect example, right? Even though it's 100 years old now. Stravinsky isn't inviting. It's not like he says, come on, let's go for a nice walk. I'll hold your hand, right? But at the same time, Stravinsky is incredibly seductive. From the first notes, it's like, come on, it's going to change your life. And there seems to be now a style of contemporary music that just doesn't like the audience. There's a fear that if the audience likes it, that means it's not good. And this makes no sense to me. Of course, right, that music doesn't have to be popular. right? It's not that everybody has to love it. So if you have something you want to say, it's not that popularity is a measure of its artistic success. But I do feel like its core should be trying to transform the performers and the audience. That's for me what I'm always trying to do is I want the audience to start the piece here, even if it's a little 3-minute piece. Start here, and they're a different person than when they started, even in a small way.
And you mentioned poetry. Do you read a lot of poetry, or do you read poetry because you have looking for a text? Do you read, and what other reading material?
I do read a lot of poetry. It's just something I've always done. My grandmother was a librarian. And so for every Christmas or holiday or birthday, I was given books, some of them poetry. I remember being young and sort of another book from grandma. And now I'm so grateful that she introduced me to all of this literature. So I have this love affair with poetry, but I'm also always just looking for words that are full of music. And so I also love film. I love films and movies. And so I buy a lot of screenplays, and I'll read the screenplays, oftentimes looking for poetry or text, even in the lines, something that could just be beautiful with set to music. So I guess I'll even read the newspaper, or I read it online, but looking even for a few lines of something that might make, something poetic, like President Trump might say.
Yeah.
That's a joke, by the way, for everybody, please. That's truly a joke. Send help. We're trapped over here. We don't know what to do. There's a madman driving our country.
Yeah. Could you have imagined that we would be using the internet and all the audio, video resources for singing?
Well, 10 years ago when I started the virtual choir, I couldn't have imagined that anybody else would do this. It was really just an experiment to see if it would work. That's the only reason I did it. Just, hey, I've got an idea. Let's see if this works. And the thing is, now it seems to be one of the only ways that we can make music together in COVID. And so I think now it's very popular, and I love that. I love that people all over are trying choirs and orchestras, and they're being incredibly clever and creative with how they make them. It's not only not the same as making music together in a room, it's the exact opposite of making. It couldn't be further from that thing. And I'm very proud of our virtual choirs. And I think they're these beautiful art forms, little art pieces, but in no way do I think of them as making music together. It's so artificial and so, it's all smoke and mirrors. No one's actually performing together. No one can feel or hear anybody. You can't breathe at the same time. All of these things that are just the basis for what we do when we make music together. I could imagine that within some years, there will be technology that is good enough that we have really excellent headphones and a sense of space, and the camera is fantastic, and there's no latency. And then we might actually be able to make music together, right? It won't be the same, but you might be able to kind of feel like you're making music.
Yeah. And do you compose straight into some music program? Do you compose at the piano? Do you all composing and at the kitchen table like Shostakovich used to do? Or
Yeah, I compose with like Shostakovich. I mean,
okay.
I'm very humbly. I am putting myself in the same sentence as Shostakovich, but that I write paper and pencil still. It's the way. Okay. And I start at the piano. Well, actually, I start by making drawings. I don't write any notes, and I draw. I called this thing emotional architecture before.
Yeah.
I draw the emotional shape of the piece, the journey that I'm hoping the performers in the audience will go on emotionally before I write a note of music. And then I sit at the piano, or I walk around and try to find that golden brick, those few notes, or that chord that is my way into that world. And then I try to spend as much time as possible composing away from the piano. I know that I'm self-taught at the piano, but I know that my fingers they always find the same shapes. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Especially if I'm in a certain key. I know that if I'm in A flat, for instance, my hands just do these. They even take me harmonically in certain places. And especially for contrapuntal writing, for voices and for strings, you end up writing nice piano music and not for the instruments themselves. And so the moment I can get away and sit at a table, at a kitchen table, and think about the lines, the better the music is.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to summarize a question by Adriana. Through your experience with choirs, what would you say to politicians so that they value musical sensitivity?
Oof. That's a good question. Thank you, Antonio. So what would I say to politicians in this time so that they value it? First, I think that there's two parts to this question. The first thing I would do is I would go to politicians with science, not emotion or even the idea of artistry. I would go with science. So we know through hard science that making music together is good for you. It's just simply good for you. And it's, for instance, we know that in young students, not only does it help them improve concentration and focus, it actually improves their scores in all of their classes, in science, in math, in history, in literature. That actually just playing together increases your scores across the board. It also, if in case politicians are even interested in the next level, it increases levels of empathy and compassion. It just makes people better citizens. It also, for young people, there's just an obvious effect. We can all see it. It just centers people. If it were up to me, every school day would start with music. It just is crazy to me that it just scientifically that you just don't start the day with an hour of music, singing or playing, but it's got to be together, right? You do this together. It fixes so many things. So that would be the first part. The second part would be, and this is an argument you can't have with politicians now, but going forward, how essential it is for all young people to have some exposure to making music together when they're young. Because what's happened now is we have this first, at least here in the United States, we have the first generation of politicians who never studied music as children. So they have no idea. They can't see any value in it at all. And to me, it's like taking the flower and cutting it from the root, that now it's going to wither this way. Somehow, some way, young people must be studying music. And then in a generation, there will be a whole group of politicians who believe that it's valuable because they've personally experienced it.
Okay, there's a couple of contributions I want to congratulate you for your experience in Syngentry. Maria wants to ask, how many editors do you need to mix these 17,000 voices, and what kind of programs software have you needed?
It's a good question. Thank you, Maria. So for those of you who haven't seen this virtual choir, there are 17,572 different voices who joined. And so Maria's question is, how do you mix all of these things together? The answer is with a lot of tequila. It's crazy. It's just crazy. And one of the things we discovered, believe it or not, is that it's easier to mix 17,000 voices than it is to mix 50 voices. So if you have 50 voices, you can hear each individual track. You can really hear the mistakes. And if somebody sings a wrong note, you can really hear it. But if you've ever gone to a football game, you know that when you hear 60,000 people all singing together, half of those people are drunk and the other half isn't. And somehow it all works, right? All of the rough edges get smoothed out. And so the same thing happens with the virtual choir. So what we discovered was that if we take Pro Tools and then or I guess this time around, maybe we used Logic Pro, but you can use either Pro Tools or Logic Pro. And then we take sopranos. So there were almost 7,000 sopranos in this choir. So we just take 100 of them and just put them into 100 tracks. And then you line them up. And the way we line them up is incredibly old-fashioned and lo-fi. I came up with this idea years ago, which was that every person who's about to sing, you'll see I do my conductor track and I go 1, 2, 3, and everyone has to clap with me. And then I start to conduct the piece. And the idea is when you put all of those tracks into Pro Tools, you can see the spike where everyone claps. You see it on their audio track, right? So you just line up all of the spikes and then it basically works together. You just push and pull a little bit. And now you've got 100 sopranos. You do a mix down of them and you set them to the side. And now you only have to do 70 tracks of sopranos, each with 100 in them, right? So at the final mix has maybe 180 tracks total, but each one of those tracks has 100 voices in it. And then you push play and it works. It's magical, but it really only works that easy when there's so many voices.
I would like to say you thanks for your time and thanks for your music, and many young people that as a student conducting and composing in Spain love your music and they are enjoyed to sing in choir on your pieces.
Thank you, Julio.
Maybe in the future we will continue to sing in your music and maybe to have you as conductor sometime.
Oh, please. You know, I've been, many years ago, I went to Bilbao, also to Madrid, and I did some small concerts there. I love Spain. I love it so much. And the moment it is safe to come back, I would love to come and to meet everybody, make some music. Thank you.
Thank you for you as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. Lovely speaking with you.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me.